Catch the NBA playoffs on Sling TV, the most flexible live TV streaming service, putting consumers in control to watch games their way with flexible subscriptions. Want to catch one game or a full series on ESPN? Grab a 1, 3, or 7-day pass. If you want to catch as many games as possible, get a monthly subscription with our ABC, NBC, and ESPN combo package. Either way, Sling lets you watch the playoffs your way with no long-term contracts. Learn more at sling.com.
Hashtag no music, no intro. We are back. The Saints Block Party podcast coming at you, brought to you and presented by Precious Works LLC. For your business website needs, reach out to our guy, Bajan. He will hook you up. And y'all, it is that time again, the annual Greg Cosell episode where we have Greg Cosell from NFL Films, from NFL Matchup, coming on and breaking down the 2026 Saints draft class. Adam, joined by my co-host, Wolf, a.k.a. Ryan. And first and foremost, Greg, thank you for joining and hopping on and doing this every year. I think we're at probably like year 4, year 5. I've lost count of how long we've done this, but it's a pleasure every time we're able to have you on. And I'll get right into it. Last draft cycle, you came out and I don't want to say like planted your flag for Tyler Shough, but just talked about how you liked him as a quarterback prospect.
Yep.
He goes on and has an impressive second half of the season after he, got starting time with the team. But just my football sicko question from the jump is all the moves that the team has done this offseason, starting with free agency, adding Travis Etienne, adding David Edwards to the offensive line, adding Noah Fant, and then the draft was very offense heavy. Jordan Tyson in round 1, Oscar Depp in round 3. Then in round 4, they added Bryce Lance and Jeremiah Wright, the right guard. Formationally, now that Kellen has added a lot of pieces to the offense that he didn't have in his first season, how do you envision him attacking defenses schematically with all these now pieces that are now on the offense?
Well, first, I will say this. I mean, we'll put Tyson aside for the moment. Obviously, he was a top 10 pick, but I really liked Oscar Delp a lot. And thought that he would be a better pro than his production in college. And I thought Bryce Lance was a really intriguing player coming out of, obviously a smaller school. But I think what Kellen Moore is known for in the league and what he does is he's pretty multiple. I don't think, I remember talking to coaches actually when he came to Philly, and I remember talking to coaches and saying, hey, can you tell me, how you see Kellen Moore and his offense? And they said that he's very multiple, that he's not really wedded to one thing. So I think now with the players they have, because they can certainly line up in 11 personnel with 3 wide receivers, they can certainly line up in 12 personnel with 2 tight ends, and they can line up in 13 personnel with 3 tight ends because, which is something that is becoming more and more prevalent in the league right now. So I think you're looking at an offense that has a lot of multiplicity to it. I think Edwards was a really good signing to play left guard, a really solid player, assuming health on the O-line. It's a solid O-line. So, I mean, I think, again, it's early May, and these conversations are wonderful to have and everybody has them. But, I think when you just look at it right now, you kind of feel like with the continued growth of Shough, which I would expect to happen, I don't think he's going to take a step back. I think he'll continue to grow. He's a very mature young man and he clearly played well the last part of the season. So I think this offense has an opportunity to be pretty multiple and pretty strong. You got 2 good backs. Kamara is is clearly closer to the end than the beginning. He's not a guy you're probably going to give the ball to 250 times, but now they have Etienne. So, I think there's a lot there to work with. I think, and I think Kellen Moore, he's considered to be one of the better offensive minds in the league. So I think, this will be a good deal.
It's so fascinating because, me, Adam, on our podcast, we've been pushing for the Saints to just add some juice to the offense.
Right.
For a long time, longer than just a year, for years now. And they finally took that approach. So what was your evaluation of Jordan Tyson coming out? Because, he was somebody, both me and Adam, we studied very closely and we liked a lot, but there were some other guys we preferred a little more than him. But when you do watch him, there are obviously some traits that are impressive.
Yeah, I mean, I like Tyson. Look, the way I felt about this wide receiver draft class as a whole was I didn't think that it was a phenomenal class in terms of, one or two guys being special. Like there was
Right.
not a Jamar Chase in this class. I've
Yeah.
already actually seen guys who are likely to be in next year's class, and there's no Jeremiah Smith or Cam Coleman that was in this particular class. But, Tyson to me, and this is what he's really good at. He was really calculatingly efficient in winning off the ball versus press. He knew how to create space. He knew how to separate. He knew how to attack the leverage of corners with his vertical stem. He had a great feel for breaking down corners technique. I didn't see him as like a dominant, wow, he's a boundary X and man, this
Right.
guy's just going to be special. But I think that you could line him up, and this is where the league is now. You line him up in multiple spots, you move him around, pre-snap movement, that's become more and more a part of the league. The one thing that didn't show up a lot on tape was he didn't have a big run after catch element to his game. But I think just in terms of being an efficient receiver and really good size. And by the way, 6'2" and an eighth is a trait. So that's a factor. But I think he's just an efficient player that, assuming health, and obviously that is a concern based on his previous couple of years, assuming health, I think that he can be a solid NFL wide receiver.
It's going to be one of the things I'm interested to see how it unfolds in the season is how the addition of Jordan Tyson and with Chris Olave, kind of blossoming and like their connection on the field and how they interplay and how Kellen Moore uses them on the field is going to be very interesting. I feel like as a Saints fan, that's one of the big exciting things going into the season. But I just wanted to circle back to your point on Oscar Delp because he was a prospect that I feel like if people really watch the all 22 of Georgia film, like his ability to block was very evident, but for his athleticism, how he tests at the combine, it feels like there's so much more to him that wasn't utilized at Georgia. So I just wanted to get your impression of him because I know you talked about him kind of at the beginning of you liked him as a player, what potentially he could bring to the Saints offense.
Well, it's funny, as you guys probably know, if people listen to me, they know that all I do is I talk about how I evaluate the players. I don't talk about where they're drafted or could they have gotten them early, later. That's irrelevant to me.
Right.
I just love evaluating the players. And I think that Delp has all the traits demanded to be a starting quality tight end. And he certainly didn't have big receiving production. And I'm not comparing him to George Kittle. They're different players. But people may remember that Kittle in his final 2 years at Iowa had something like 20 and 22 receptions. So, you can't just look at his production and say, well, that's not good. He's not going to be a good pro. That's somewhat irrelevant. He's got multi-dimensional traits. To be honest with you, there were times watching his tape that I thought of Dallas Goedert when he came out of South Dakota State. And believe me, if he turns out to be Dallas Goedert, I think people in New Orleans would probably be very happy. But that's who I thought of when I watched his tape. It reminded me of Goedert coming out of South Dakota State. And Goedert was a second-round pick. Obviously, he had, quote-unquote, better college production, albeit at a smaller level of competition. But I really liked Oscar Delp a lot for what he could do. And by the way, we were talking about the fact that they could, line up in multiple personnel packages. I mean, you talked about, Adam, you just spoke about Olave and Tyson. Think about what they could do with Johnson, who was a wide receiver in college, as you know, and can line up anywhere in the formation. Fant has wide receiver speed, so you can line him up anywhere in the formation. And now you have Delp. So you could basically at times play with 3 tight ends and have 11 personnel concepts. And that's what makes it really difficult for defenses.
That's what gets me excited because if you watch, I'm sure you didn't watch plenty of Saints film last year, but if you watch the Saints tape, Kellen Moore tried to dabble in some of the, the 12 personnel, the 13, but they just didn't have the guys. They just didn't have the guys.
Right.
They had Juwan Johnson and some, UDFA guys. You had Taysom Hill, who was coming off of ACL. They had Foster Moreau, also coming off a torn ACL. The guys just weren't the same. So you could tell this year they made a focused effort to really upgrade that tight end room. So it's going to be fascinating because one thing, that 12 personnel thing, yes, it helps the run game, but teams like to pass out of it too. And I think that's
question.
That's what makes it exciting.
That's where the league's going. Believe me, I'm not as smart as Mike McDonald, the Seahawks head coach, and I heard him speak about playing with multiple personnel packages. And, he was basically saying one reason that Seattle could really defend it well is they didn't have to change their personnel on defense because of Nick and Wari. But, you start lining up with 13 personnel like the Rams did. You look at Matthew Stafford's numbers throwing the ball out of 13 personnel, and there were a lot of throws. It wasn't just a sometime thing. The pass game was a major element out of 13 personnel, and Stafford's numbers were just off the charts. So again, we don't know exactly what Kellen Moore is going to do. It's May. We don't know the answer to these questions.
Right.
But I'm sure that will be part of his arsenal, that there will be 13 personnel packages and a pass game that works out of that.
And that's what I think as Saints fans, we should all be excited to see how it unfolds. I feel like we could spend this entire episode talking offense, but I don't want to neglect the defense and the work that Brandon Staley did especially towards the last half of the season, where the Saints statistically had like a top 10 defense. And I think I can speak for myself and Ryan, like one of the underrated stories of last season for the Saints is how well the defense played overall, especially considering kind of like the talent that they had. They lost Alontae Taylor in free agency. In the draft, they added Christian Miller, defensive tackle from Georgia. After that, they signed Anthony Jennings from the Patriots. And it seems like there's this very huge effort of improving the run defense overall as a whole. But how could you maybe see the evolution of Brandon Staley's defense in year 2 and what he wants to do to kind of stymie offenses? Yo, what are you looking at?
Man, I'm checking out this website. This site is cheeks, bro.
In the 21st century? How do you have a crappy website? Couldn't be me.
They need to hit up our guy Bijan with Precious Works. Precious Works offers to not only build you a website that's tailored to you and your customers' needs, but also to continue to manage and maintain it so you can focus on your business. Don't have much time? Precious Works is just what you need. No out-of-the-box stuff like Squarespace or Wix. Precious Works will create a site for you. You won't have to worry about plugin updates, security, or things like that because Precious Works will maintain all of that and be available to you 24/7. Bijan set up Saints Block Party Podcast website for us a few years ago and hit it out the park. He also keeps it up to date and helps us anytime we want to add something new like a form or prospect matching tool that we did for the NFL draft. It's like having your own personal developer just a text or a call away. Precious Works has worked with everyone from small businesses to large firms, so no job is too big or too small. If you're in the need of a website or you currently have one, but you want to upgrade it, give Bijan a holler at Precious Works. You can get with him at Bijan at Precious Works, BIJON at precious.works, or go to precious.works for his website. Make sure to tell him Saints Block Party sent you.
Yeah, well, I mean, Staley he's an interesting guy because I think that he has some foundational principles, but obviously, guys have to adjust and change. It's hard just to, say, hey, this is what we're going to do, and that's it. I tell you, before we get to that, I think one player that's a really good player that they signed, and you didn't mention him, but I think Caden Ellis is a really good player. I saw him a lot in Atlanta. And he's, look, obviously they lost to Mario Davis, who it appears he's going to play till he's 50 and be really good. But, and obviously he was just a great leader. He's just a great human being. But Caden Ellis is a really good player, which also tells me that they don't think someone like Stutzman is really ready to step right in and play, because I'm sure Ellis and Warner will be the stars. And they've got a young secondary. I mean, last year, I thought Sanker and Quincy Riley, when he got a chance, played really well. And McKinstry's only going into his 3rd year. This is a young group with 2 really good veterans to keep it together, and Reed and Blackman. So, I think this is a really interesting group, and I think it gives Staley a lot to work with. He's a big believer in sort of that gap and a half principle with your defensive lineman, which I think Brian Brees really good at, and he's a really good player. And by the way, I really like Christian Miller's tape a lot. There were some D tackles in this draft that were really dominant run stuffers, but that couldn't rush the quarterback. I think Miller was one of the few at D tackle that gives you a chance to that has both traits. And again, you never know with a rookie if he can come in and do it right away. You just don't know the answer to that. But I think that he can do that. He's not just a one-dimensional guy. I think he can be a pass rusher from the inside as well as be a quality run defender.
Yeah, I tried to watch some Christian Miller. For me, watching defensive tackles on all 22 can be kind of a struggle. Because it's not a flashy position, like it's a lot of
Mm-mm.
just a lot of grunt work, a lot of dirty work. But he was one when I put on, I was like, "Ooh, this is good." Like
He's hot blooded.
you could
Yeah.
immediately see, like, okay, he's a strong, powerful, like stout guy, and he pushes guys back. That's what I try to look
They
for.
lined him up in a lot of spots too at Georgia. It wasn't
Yeah.
just,
Yeah,
one place. So, I mean, because he's got that kind of athletic movement. But we'll see. Again, like I said, rookies, you never know how much they're going to play.
yeah,
Obviously, there's things they have to learn. It's not just, hey, line up and beat up the guy in front of you. There's a lot involved. So, we'll see what happens. But I thought he was a really good prospect based on my tape evaluation, and we'll see how it all plays out. But like I said, the Caden Ellis was the guy to me when I saw that they
yeah.
signed him. I thought, oh, that guy's a really good football.
A BetterHelp ad. Therapy isn't just for times of major challenge. It's a valuable tool for anyone wanting to improve their well-being. It can help you develop healthy coping skills, set boundaries, and support personal growth. BetterHelp makes it easy to get matched online with a fully licensed therapist right from your phone. No commuting, no waiting rooms. And you can switch therapists at any time. Sign up at BetterHelp.com and get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp.com.
Player.
No question. Go ahead. No, I was just about to mention this Caden Ellis. Like, one thing about him that I really just enjoy watching is how he's on the ball so much. Third down, like I watched all
Yeah,
his third
yeah.
downs, and he is like right there in the line. He's either rushing the passer or he's, fooling like he's going to rush the passer. And the Saints fans, though, because he played for the Saints for a while, we only really 1 year before he got shipped out.
Well, he gives you a
So
ton of versatility too. I mean, that's the thing. There's versatile players here. And I think that's, in an ideal world, all coaches like that because then you can
yeah,
do a lot of things and you can trust. See, it's funny. Coaches often use, particularly on defense, trust. And Caden Ellis is a player you can trust to do a lot of different
Mhm.
things well. He can rush the quarterback. Look, in Atlanta, because they were a heavy blitz team under Jeff Ulbrich. So as you guys know, it's same division. They're a heavy blitz team. So Caden Ellis very often, as you just mentioned, Wolf, lined up on the ball a lot. He was used as a pass rusher. You
Yep.
can certainly do that here. I mean, there's a lot of opportunities here to do multiple things on the defensive side of the ball.
It is. It is. And they're going to need, and I think they're counting on Caden Ellis to add additional pass rush.
Yeah.
Chase Young had his best season as,
Yeah.
just an outstanding season. You had Granderson, who kind of like is, up and down just in terms of his consistency. And then we still don't know what the outcome, if they're going to bring, Cam Jordan back or not. So I think they're banking on getting additional pass rush help from Caden Ellis, especially like on third down.
Sure.
The last one that I had, kind of just going back to the offense, is what is the next step in terms of the things that we should be wanting to see from Tyler Shough in year two, for him to show continued growth and development? Because I feel like the team has tried their best to put a lot of options and
Sure. Yeah.
weapons on the table for him to be successful. But what are the things that, potentially we should be looking at to see him take that, quote unquote next step in his development?
I would say that in terms of what you'd hope to see was a little more now of the development of an intermediate pass game. I thought that last year, again, and I always try to understand where a guy is in his development, where he is within the context of his system. I thought you saw him make some really good deep throws, and then thought you saw him, very often just, check it down, so to speak, or throw the ball really short. And normally that happens because a quarterback is not exactly comfortable with what he's seeing, because obviously to make those intermediate throws, particularly between the numbers, there's a lot of bodies there, more so than in college because the hash marks are closer. So it seems like there's just more bodies in the middle of the field. So that's the next step to me, seeing that part of the field with more vision and more clarity so you can have that dimension to your pass game.
yeah, it's going to be fascinating. It was impressive to see because a lot of Saints fans were not in love with the Tyler Shough pick when it happened. But after you watch him a little bit, you can like, okay, I could see the vision. And then once he came in and he finally got some starts under his belt, it was kind of impressive
Yeah.
to see some of the
And he's a
throws he would
big
make.
guy too. I mean,
Yeah, he rips it too. He rips the ball.
No question. I know. No, look, you guys know. I mean, because I spoke about it last year quite a bit. And of course, people thought I was crazy, but I thought that his college tape was the second best after Cam Ward. And again, I never, when I saw his college tape, I have no idea, of course, where he's going to get drafted. I'm doing all this before the draft. But I thought that he was a really legitimate prospect. And obviously, I always love guys, and I joke about this with people. I love when you watch the draft and a guy gets drafted, and on TV they say, "Boy, that's a surprise." And the first thing I think of it to myself is, "Well, it's not a surprise to the team; they just drafted him." So I mean, and they have a lot more people doing this than the guys on TV. So but Tyler Shough, to me, has a lot of talent. He's big. He's not immobile by any means. He can throw on the run. He certainly can get the ball down the field. As I said, now you want to be able to work that intermediate levels and be really efficient with that.
I just wanted to ask you, just before you get out of here, Drew Brees, made the Hall of Fame. He's going to be inducted in a couple of months. I'd be remiss if I just don't ask you as like a football historian, a quarterback expert. What comes to mind when you think of Drew Brees? Like when you think of Drew Brees, what comes to mind when you think of him and his impact on the game and his quarterback play?
Just the highest level efficiency possible, just playing the position exactly the right way. I mean, that's Drew Brees. I mean, without going into the weeds, we're not going to start breaking down, but just playing it exactly the way theoretically it's taught and it's coached, and just doing it that way almost all the time. I mean, just don't forget he was 6 feet tall and he did not have a gun. And certainly later in his career, his arm got even a little lesser, and he still played at a high level. And obviously I've read books and articles over the years about Brees and just his commitment to being the absolute best all the time in everything he did. And that's what it takes. And, he was, for me, and again, some people might say I'm a dinosaur and I'm old, but I actually enjoy quarterback play where guys play like that. I mean, we all get excited watching, Josh Allen or Lamar run around. That's exciting. But to me, and maybe because I was taught the position by Bill Walsh, to me, when I watch someone like Drew Brees, play the position that way, that to me is really exciting. That's really fulfilling to me because that's the way it's taught. And that's, and it's just, he did it at the highest level possible for a long, long time too. And that's really hard to do.
And I think even like looking back, even like Ryan and I like realize in the moment how special it was, but like you don't, as a sports fan, you don't really realize what you kind of have until you no longer have it. And so, because there's been some dark years post Drew Brees, but I will say that this upcoming season, I feel like there's the most optimism in a Saints season I have felt, just the general consensus in a long time. And I'm not saying that they're gonna be a playoff team or a wild card team, but there does seem to be things going in the right direction for.
And we don't. Again, like I said, we're talking in early May. We don't know the answer to a lot of those questions. Obviously, Carolina was in the playoffs last year. It's a solid division, maybe not a great division, but it's a solid competitive division right now. And, the Saints are one of those really intriguing teams to me. There's a couple that I'm really curious to see how they are. Tennessee's an example of that. The Saints are an example of that. There's some teams, that maybe not are in the national conversation on a regular basis, but for someone like me, they're really intriguing. I'm very curious to see how it plays out.
Yeah. And we'll see how it plays out this upcoming season. Greg, thank you so much for joining us. As always, a tremendous knowledge and just insight for our listeners and our viewers. We appreciate you making the time to come on. For all our viewers and listeners, we appreciate y'all listening, all the support y'all give to Ryan and I. And with that, we are out.
Peace.
A BetterHelp ad. Therapy isn't just for times of major challenge. It's a valuable tool for anyone wanting to improve their well-being. It can help you develop healthy coping skills, set boundaries, and support personal growth. BetterHelp makes it easy to get matched online with a fully licensed therapist right from your phone. No commuting, no waiting rooms. And you can switch therapists at any time. Sign up at BetterHelp.com and get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp.com.